Welcome to This Is My Architecture. I am Neel from AWS, and joining me today is Craig from Astadia. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks for having me.
Tell us about Astadia.
Right.
What do you do?
Astadia does three main things. We do software lifecycle services, helping people get their DevOps environment set up and managing that environment. We do managed services, helping customers get their cloud environment set up and managing those environments. Sure. And then my favorite group, which is a legacy modernization group, is where we take legacy applications and move them into the AWS environment.
That's awesome. So are we going to talk about your favorite group?
That's right. Okay. That's right. I think,
let's get started.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do this is to give you a use case scenario. Sure. So if you think about mainframes, which tend to be expensive, you're going to have on a typical mainframe, maybe you have some assembler code. You're most definitely going to have COBOL. I'd be very surprised if you didn't. There are some that don't have COBOL, but
sure.
About 200 billion lines of COBOL out there today.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have possibly a transaction monitor like CICS.
Okay.
You may have some IMS, which is another transaction monitor, or you could have something like a TIP transaction monitor or comms transaction monitor.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about all of these things. For batch COBOL, you're going to take the batch COBOL, we analyze it.
Mm-hmm.
Given our experience of doing this for 25 years, we know what to look for, where all the warts are. And we take that COBOL and we put it into an EC2 instance with the least amount of change, which means the least amount of risk. And this EC2 instance will run your batch COBOL extremely well. If you find that you're not getting the performance you need, you can scale vertically, which is very easy to do in AWS.
That's great. So you were saying that there is no refactoring needed.
Nope.
You just take your code from the mainframe and just lift and shift and run on the EC2 instance.
That's right.
Okay.
The COBOL and the JCL that goes with it.
Okay.
So for online, something like CICS or IMS, you still have COBOL code.
Sure.
But it's online code, which means it's more of a transaction-based environment. So it's the same process. We take the code, we analyze it, and we move that code into an EC2 instance. Your user interface that customers use to get to the mainframe today, that same user interface will now just point to the EC2 instance that's running the application. Now, to get scalability here, you could go vertically, but what we find is that it's a lot more efficient to do smaller machines and use the elastic load balancer to bring up clones of this application. So instead of going directly to an EC2 instance, you would go up to your elastic load balancer to make the request, and then it requests, let's say, from this EC2 instance, and then maybe the CPU gets up to 60% capacity.
Then you do auto scale.
Bring up this one, right?
Yeah.
Bring up this one, okay?
Yeah.
And then as the workload diminishes, you start bringing these down, okay? And it saves a lot of money over a mainframe, which you pay for the whole environment no matter what.
That's great. So let's talk about how you are essentially getting the code to EC2. So it's a COBOL code, and I see code commit here. So you found a magic sauce to get the code to code commit?
Right. So what we do is we use a combination of our own tools and third-party tools.
Okay.
For development, we tend to use Micro Focus Enterprise Developer.
Okay.
So it plugs into Visual Studio. It also plugs into Eclipse, which means that it then plays into your DevOps world, right? So your legacy application, which was one siloed away, now has a play in your DevOps processes. And then they have another product called Enterprise Server, which essentially allows you to run mainframe COBOL applications on Windows or Linux or Unix. They've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing it for 25 years.
That's great. And that also helps you to deploy the code from the code commit to the actual EC2 instances?
Right.
Okay.
And their latest release also has support for Docker containers. So now you can take your legacy COBOL applications and actually run them in a Docker environment, which is great for ISVs.
That's amazing. Many of my enterprise customers, they are using mainframe, and I'm sure they will be super happy to see their COBOL code without refactoring running on a Dockerized container.
That's right.
That's awesome.
That's right.
What about the database side of it?
Sure.
Yeah.
So on the mainframe side, you're going to have a relational database like DB2,
Yeah.
or you may have a hierarchical database like IMSDB.
Yeah.
So relational databases move over really easy from relational to relational in RDS, running
Okay.
Aurora under MySQL or something like
Sure.
that. The hierarchical databases, whether it's the IMSDB or maybe a DMS2 database, we have a process whereby we normalize that into a relational environment, and then we make the changes, pump the data over into the relational database, and of course the program's data accesses need to change to reflect that.
Okay, that's great. Another thing is in terms of security. I have seen many of the mainframe customers are very concerned about security as well. So are you able to leverage the same security model in AWS Cloud as well?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
So as part of our projects, we take a look at, if you have RACF, we look at RACF or ACF, ACF2, and look at those profiles and those permissions, and we map them to Active Directory or some other product that the client chooses.
Okay, that's great. And then what is happening with S3 here?
So you may have some files on the mainframe that
Sure.
you need to keep, maybe regulatory reasons.
Okay.
Maybe they can't go offsite to be archived, but you need access to them on an as-needed basis. So those files you can just put here in S3 to hold them there and just get them when you need them.
Okay, that's awesome. So traditionally, how long do you see customers migrating their workloads from mainframe to cloud?
Yeah, so I would say, generally speaking, as an average, we see around 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
With an ROI within a year.
Okay.
We find that you save 80 to 90% going to an environment like this over the mainframe, which, as we all know, is expensive.
That's amazing. So I think we discussed that how customers can use their mainframe artifacts without much refactoring, move to cloud, how you can also help moving from mainframe relational database or hierarchical database back to AWS on a relational database store as well. And then you can take advantage of Docker from now onwards as well.
That's right.
So this looks great. Thanks for sharing this architecture with us,
Yeah,
Craig.
glad to be here.
Yeah, and thanks for watching. This is my architecture.